1, 2, 3. We are not live. We are not live, but we are alive. Today we are going to be doing some EPP with some lovely little hexagon shapes. But today we have got a guest in the house. It is lovely John Cole.
Me! Can I do this? I'm sorry, I've been waiting to do this all afternoon. I got given as a gift pumpkin spice gin, and of course it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So, you know, you've got to have a little gin and tonic when you meet new friends. Hello, darlings. How are we all?
I have water.
I've got tea.
Rachel, I know that's vodka. Don't lie. Cheers, everyone.
Gin! Oh, you know, I'm just jealous of the art creations. I'm jealous of the drink.
Oh, hello. Pumpkin spice gin. That's the way to go.
And lovely YouTuber, you know what I'm going to say. Make sure that you please give us the thumbs up if you like the content. Thumbs up, press the button, and also subscribe to our channel as well, because we would love to have you as one of our followers. We'd love to be able to talk to you every single week. And if you hit the notification bell, it means that you'll be notified when we load our content, which is currently every Friday. Every Friday, we load a lovely video for you. So please do that. Or
Ding dong.
Ding dong. How did you hear that? Ding dong. Perfect. Lovely. So we're all set then, are we? We've got the gin, we've got the water, vodka. It is water, and we've got our lovely tea with our lovely Gary. So, well, so lovely to have a guest in the studio, Gary, isn't it? The lovely John Cole Morgan, who people may have seen on my Instagram account, on the Crafty Monks Instagram account, because, John, you took me around the Festival of Quilts, didn't you? We did a lovely live, and it was so well received.
It's my favourite thing to do.
I know, and it was fabulous because you are a man of knowledge. We should introduce you, John, and find out a little bit about you, because I know you've got a YouTube channel, and you have got your shop, which you're sitting in right now, and you are a quilter, and you do all sorts of lovely things. So tell us a little bit, potted history. Who is John Cole Morgan?
You don't need to know that. I tell you what it is. I love quilting. I kind of managed my midlife crisis by, instead of buying a sports car, I instead bought enormous amounts of fabric, bought a long-arm quilting machine, fell in love with all things quilting, and now have an entire acre of color around me every single day. And I love quilting on all aspects of it. I just love it. Mainly the amazing people we get to meet and sew with. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to share and enjoy.
And you've got a lovely shop, which you're sitting in right now. So tell us the name of your shop and where it is, because if anybody is nearby, they might want to pop in.
We'd love to have you. Just ring first. I want to make sure it's safe for you to come in without tripping on bolts of fabric. The shop's called I Quilt, and we are in Tring in Hertfordshire. So yeah, we'd love to have you. Yeah,
and actually you can shop online as well with you, can't you? So I will put your description in the box below. So if anybody just wants to have your fabrics, they can have a look there in the link. So, John, how long have you actually been sewing? I mean, was it something you started as a child, or was it just something you picked up in the last few years? How did it start?
I didn't own a sewing machine. I'd never used a sewing machine. I'd never bought fabric. I'd never done anything. So in 2014, the night before my birthday, I went to my very first quilt class with a group of ladies down in Lewisham in southeast London. And the first quilt I ever made is terrible. I think that's a kind way of putting it. It was really bad. And my husband turned to me after I'd made it and said, "Darling, should we get you some classes before you waste any more fabric? He will be buried in that quilt one day." But it just gets under your soul. And I think what's really interesting for me, I love quilting because it's so mindful, and you spend so much time focusing on a specific thing to get it right and to be able to enjoy doing it. And I think that's something we don't normally do in our daily lives. I was brought up in South Africa, so men doing any form of handcraft or anything like that, it's unheard of. So for me, being able to then make something really pretty that I enjoy and love with my hands, it's just very different. So I found that really, really inspiring and lovely.
How many quilts do you think you've made then in that time since you made the terrible one?
So personally, I think I've made about 280. I've quilted over 400 quilts for clients in the shop. I've got a beautiful long arm quilting machine. So that runs about 2-3 days a week running for other people. But yeah, I've got about 240, 250. That's a lot of quilts. So they've not been quilted yet because I don't know where I'd put them. My husband's very patient already. I'm not sure an extra 250 quilts in the house would help.
That's a lot of sofas and beds to have in the house to throw your quilts in.
Indeed.
Indeed. So, John, obviously, this is your daily life and your living now. That you're making these quilts and you have this shop and you're selling the fabric, and I know that you run retreats and all those things. So, what about your downtime? Do you still find that you are still attracted to sewing and maybe doing the hand sewing like we're going to do today as a mindful practice? How do you actually relax?
I will always tell everybody, having taken my passion and made it my job, don't. And the reason being is my downtime is my work time. So I find that I do a lot more crochet because I try not to sell wool or do anything crochet wise with my job to keep them separate. But I do find as well, I entered the Festival of Quilts myself, 8 quilts in 6 weeks. I don't recommend it. I made a whole load of quilts for festival, but I really enjoy the competition side of things. And that's nothing to do with the shop. So I find a lot of time now spent planning different quilts that might work for a competition or might not. I'm never going to win this competition, by the way. It's just more a case of being able to do something for me and enjoy it from my side. Because I think you get competitive in this industry and you've got to, if you're not winning and you're not doing this, it's not good enough. But it's more about finishing it and enjoying it and trying something you've never tried before, even if you hate it.
I have to say as well, though, John, I loved your quilt. I mean, when I went to the Festival of Quilts and I saw your I'm Starting to Forget You quilt, and I didn't know it was yours at all. It really stood out to me. I mean, obviously, I lost my dad last year. So anything that is about loss or grief, kind of struck me. So I was very struck by it. But it was interesting. And this is what I love about quilting and quilts, is that everybody has a different viewpoint. Because when I showed it to my husband, when I showed him the photograph, he said to me, oh, I see that more about Alzheimer's, or something like that, I'm starting to forget you, and that scares me. So I love it how, your piece and other pieces like that, it kind of say different things to different people. But I'm intrigued. I want to know, John, what was the thought behind that quilt for you? What was that quilt about? I'm starting to forget you, and that scares me.
That's very hard. I have no relationship with my family at all. That is by choice, and we are all much happier people apart from each other, and I wish them nothing but great joy, happiness far away from me. And I'm happy with that, and they're living their lives. But for me, when you are a person who doesn't have a proper family that way, your friends become your family. And 2 of the biggest rocks of my life died of COVID 6 weeks apart from one another in South Africa. So for me, that was very, very difficult, because obviously one of them was younger than me by 6 months. One of them was a little bit older than me. They were both very fit and healthy and really amazing individuals. But obviously, being in the middle of the COVID and the pandemic, you couldn't travel, you couldn't do funerals. It's very hard. So dealing with that type of grief is very, very difficult. And everybody deals with grief differently and at different times. So for me, it's a case of, I think, you having lost yourself, we all feel guilt when we forget them, and we all feel it's like we're letting them down. But when they were alive, you would have a week or 2 where you wouldn't remember them then either. And it doesn't mean you don't love them, and it doesn't mean you don't want them in your life. It's just a case of that's life. So for me, it was really hard, because I'd actually picked the phone up to phone my friend and realized halfway through the dialing process that his phone number is no longer existing. And that for me was the reason for the quilt, was to be able to just make it okay that you're forgetting them. And it's hard because I think the Alzheimer's thing is really very interesting, because unfortunately dementia and Alzheimer's is a horrible, most awful disease, and people going through it is horrible, but they have the same feelings and the same terrible emotions in that.
It's interesting you say about the phone call thing, because literally 2 weeks ago, I'm going to call my dad, and I had the phone in my hand, and it was weird because I knew he'd been dead for a year, but I had that moment. I'm going to call my dad. Oh, and you do, don't you? Just go, oh, he's not there anymore. So but that I think it was a beautiful piece, John, and thank you for sharing that story with us. And I do think that's why a lot of people liked it so much, and it touched people on so many levels, because that's part of life, isn't it? Grief, loss, losing people we care for. But that's the beautiful thing about quilting and sewing, is that, as you know, John, when you run your retreats and things, all these people come together, we work together, we sew together. We're a lovely community of people, like the 3 of us are now meeting as a group today. It's a very nice thing to do, isn't it? And I would imagine that's really important to you. Is that really important to you, that feeling of community as well as the business side of things?
For me, I think the business side of things is I'm a dreadful business person. As an accountant, I would have told myself to shut my shop 5 years ago, the day I opened it, because I don't think a quilt shop will ever be something that you will ever make successful. Just the community are so special. And they, especially for me, having older women in my life, I think the other piece I made for Festa was the highlighting of society's attitude towards women of a certain age. And I think men, women, everybody are guilty of kind of ignoring the vast knowledge and incredible wit and great joy you can get from a relationship with people who are slightly older. And I love them. I think my ladies are just so amazing. And I've learned more from them about sewing, life, sex, than anything else in the entire world, because they'd kill me for saying that. But it's just, they're such amazing women, and they're not these 75-year-old little grannies. They are vibrant, vital human beings that unfortunately society doesn't see as they once were.
When I've run my retreats like you have, the women you meet there are some amazing characters, and the stories, you know, the things that they've been through, you have these great conversations with them, and you realize just how much vim and vigor they still have. And even more, they're even more attractive because they know who they are by this point. They're not going to suffer fools gladly, you know. They know, they as that great t-shirt said that I saw recently, this ain't my first rodeo, you know. And I think that's very true. Yeah. Thank you so much for stepping in today, and we found out a little bit more about you. And yeah, it's, you know, like I say, I loved your quilt that you did, and I love you and your personality and how warm and giving you are. And it's great to see another man in the sewing community out there flying the flag. So, John, you have brought a little exercise for us today, and this is something that anybody can do, and it's a lovely little mindful practice. So, shall we come to your hands now and see what we're going to do? So, if you flick to your hand.
With pleasure. So it's really simple. You take 7 hexagons on one side, 7 hexagons on the other side. You put them right sides together. You sew them all the way around here until there. Then you turn it round, and then you stitch those together and stuff it as you go. Really simple. Introduction to EPP. I taught this as a class, and I will never forget, this lady came on and she did it. And she turned around at the end of the class. She says, well, thanks for that. I hated every minute of it. I'm never doing EPP again. Thanks. And off she went. It's my favorite thing ever, because that is exactly what little baby classes like this are for. It's to show you what works and what doesn't work for you. And it's really, really important to have those goes. So earlier, I sent Rachel a picture of a quilt that I started with 8 years ago, designed with Stuart Hillard's first collection of fabric called Sewing Bee, when he was on the Sewing Bee. And I think it's a really important thing is the right threads. So good old Nicholas Ball has got his thread box over here with Orifil. So he's got 40 weight and 50 weight threads, beautiful colors here. And the thing with EPP that I love is you're able to use all these beautiful colored threads to match the colors that you're using. And I think it's important to be able to use thread that works for you. I prefer Orifil. You must use what works best for you. And really simply being able to find fun fabrics that you can go and create really exciting things with, and being able to do them like this, and you can position them however you want to, and just to create these really cute little designs, I think is a fun way of being able to just enjoy English paper piecing. But equally, when you have sewn them together, you then sew along the outside of that, turn it round, and then they're obviously facing each other this way. You stuff it with some stuffing, so it's nice and squidgy like that. And then you go and you sew better than I do along the top there to seal it up. Now, before you get to that point, Rachel has very, very kindly uploaded a series of templates for you here. I think the most important thing you need to remember when you're doing these templates is when you measure, when you say to somebody, I'm using a 1-inch hexagon, that's what they mean. The length of the short side should measure 1 inch. Now, because you're printing this at home, make sure that when you have printed one single page of it, take a ruler and check that from that point to that point is 1 inch. It's very important you check these as you go, because it's very easy to get it wrong. If you have got it wrong and it is bigger than 1 inch, that's fine. Just make sure you print them all the same at that time. because if you get them all the same, it doesn't really matter. The problem comes when you do a whole load at 1 inch and a whole load at 1/8 of an inch bigger or smaller. When you come to put them together, you've got holes, and we don't want that. And then, of course, the big ones that we've got on here as well, these are your 2 inches. So you can see from the edge to there is 2 inches. If I line my ruler correctly, from there to there is 2 inches. So that is your 2 inch. So the template that we've got is 1 inch, 1.5, and then 2. So that's the template that you're going to get. Now, when I print these, I normally print them on a sort of thick card. So you'll see that this is a thicker printer paper than you would normally use. I prefer it being the thickest I can possibly get through my printer. And when you cut it, the goal is to cut through the middle of your line along here. So ideally, you've got half on this side and half on the piece that you're cutting out. That's the goal. If we're at the point that you are criticizing yourself for not cutting it square, just be as consistent as you can. So some people find it better just putting it down and cutting on the outside of all of the pieces. That is absolutely fine. But most good quilt shops that you will go to will sell you a pack of 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and they will cost you a couple of quid to be able to get them. And they're all consistent. They're all done for you. And you can use them on any form of AccuQuilt die or Sizzix die as well. Now, there are 2 ways of doing this. I don't have much time available to me to do these, so I always use glue pens. And my glue pen, I would then just take and put a stripe of glue on here. I'm going to make this quite a dark one, and you can see I have not used any glue on this portion of my paper. The reason being is if the glue gets on the end there, you can end up then having clumps of glue when you come to sew that all together, and that's not what you ideally want. All of these Sewline glue pens, they will go on either in yellow, pink, or blue, but they will all dry clear. And all you'll do then is you will just push these along and always pick up little random bits of thread from fabric that isn't anywhere near you. And you just hold that down and press it down. And then you go clockwise or anti-clockwise. There's no right or wrong. When I always do it, you can see when I push that there, it's lifting up. So I always put my finger there, and then I hold my finger on the other side of the fabric, and I pull that a little bit towards myself. Just that way, then I haven't got any bulk on the fabric under the thing. So you can see that's a really good blue line. No fabric, no glue pen over here. So that's all going there. And literally just put your finger underneath there. And I start in the middle, and then I work out to the edges. Now, if you get to this bit over here, and you can see I've got a little bit of an overlap there. If you're not happy with how the overlap is, just take a pair of scissors, you peel that up, and you just miter the corner a little more comfortably. And then I put a little bit of glue pen on the edge of the fabric over there, and then do that. And you get a better miter on your corner as you're going along. And you just keep repeating that all the way along your fabric. I often get asked, how long does the glue last? My glue, I've been really lucky. They've lasted about 8 years for the kit that I've got for my Stuart quilt. And I'll show you how I store them, because for me, I find it wonderfully mindful to sit in front of the television, watching something lovely, and just going and gluing all my hexagons down at the same time. And I then put them in my airtight container, and my airtight container goes into a little box or a little cupboard where there's no light, there's no changing in temperature, and they then all stay there ready to go. So there you go. You can see I've now got my Adidas Satar fabric as a centerpiece for any one of my hexagons. Now, if you do not have a hexagon or a die or a Sizzix or anything, what I do, and I know this is a little bit wasteful, and if you don't want to be this wasteful, that's absolutely fine. You need to keep about 3/8 of inch of fabric around your piece to be able to create your seam allowance. So you just cut yourself a square or a rectangle of fabric, and then you just trim this down to be the size that you need it to be.
That's exactly what I've done.
Yeah, and the great thing about this is it doesn't matter how neat you've been or how messy you've been, because I guarantee you, no one is coming to look at the inside of your quilts. If you do want to baste with a pair of If you do want to baste with needle and thread, by all means, go ahead and do that. I think there are some much better explanations of basting on YouTube than I can give you, because, as I said before, I like my glue paints, and I've never actually looked into the basting by hand.
Yeah.
Because I just think that if I'm going to be stitching, I would rather just stitch the seam that I'm stitching to hold it all together. So I'm going to have that be my center, this one be my center, and then this is going to be the piece that's going on the outside. So there is no right or wrong way of doing this. It is how works best for you. What I do think is the most difficult of all is the threading of your needle. The lovely, lovely Jenny Raymond taught me a wonderful trick once. And that quite simply was, if you're struggling to thread your needle, we're always putting the thread in our mouth to do it. Her suggestion is you always lick the eye of the needle rather than the thread.
I did not know that.
Well, I just licked the eye of this needle and that went through perfectly. So Jenny Raymond, thank you. I use double thread. You can see that I've threaded that through, and then I do a triple knot on the end of my double thread over here. I know that's quite controversial as well. Everybody does it differently. There is no right or wrong. You must do what works best for you. Maybe that's just because I lack confidence in the hand stitching that I do. So we've got these two pieces here. We're going to sew this seam over here. So I'm going to fold this one on top of the other. And this is now where you'll check if your hexagon is the same size. If you have got a little bit of a difference, whether it be by a millimeter or two, what I would suggest you do is you line up this side over here and you do your anchoring stitch here. So what you're looking to do is your needle is going to go through one or two threads over here, and hopefully you can see my needle's gone through one red thread over here on this side, and then one cream thread over here. And what you're going to do is you're going to push that through, and then, oh, I've got a little ripple in my thread here. So once you've done that, I try and go through the exact same hole again, because then you've got it's almost like a locking stitch you would do on a sewing machine. You've then created that locking stitch with your hand piecing.
Yep.
And there we go. Now, I always get asked, how many stitches per inch do you do? And it's just like with your sewing machine, between 12 and 14 stitches. A wonderful trick I learned is that what you can do is on your index finger over here, draw the gap that you want it to be, being an 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch on your actual fingernail or on your hand, because then where you are going to be doing it every time is you just move your finger to where the stitch is, and where the ink mark is where you're going to be stitching all the way along. That keeps you nice and even all the way through your quilting on it.
What a great idea. Top tip.
Well, I just use it by eye, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Because I just thoroughly enjoy hand piecing. I think it is so therapeutic and so mindful, and I think it's so much. We just need time every now and then to just stop and to focus on something different.
Yeah, Sarah Payne, she actually, when she broke her leg, she made a lovely quilt, didn't she, that she made through the entire recovery, and she put that on the Festival of Quilts.
She did.
It was little mini hexagons all sewed together.
And I was so pleased because she saw the fabric collection that I was selling on my website one day, and she was like, I love that. And she bought the fabric from me to do it.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful collection of that. And it's, I think as well, when you find that right fabric, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And when you're
Gary,
sewing, John, are you sewing from right to left or left to right? Which way do you direction?
I sew away from myself.
Right.
I think I'm a scaredy cat. I always sew away from myself. And as you can see at the minute, I don't use a thimble either, because I'm holding the pieces together and I'm always pointing away from me. But everybody is different that way. You've got people who use needle minders. What are they called? Sew tights. You can get them with the magnets and holding it together. Other people just use clips. I just use my fingers and push away through it. But when you get a little loop like that happening, when you get a tiny little loop like that happening, just pull one side of the thread because it's gone a bit funny. Gary, how long do you take your thread when you do this?
So I mean, when I'm sewing in general, I never have that length, a long thread. So I really only measure when I always thread my needle like you were measuring. I just measure just before my elbow joint. So I've got it in my hand to my elbow joint. Then that is enough. There is no point in having loads of thread that you're trying to pull away from you, because it's just an extra.
And it always
you know,
knots.
Yes, it's just not. It's just absolutely not. I was always told that there's a direction to thread from the reel. So if you imagine, if you threaded it onto a bobbin, it's back to front. But if you're taking it directly from a reel, as soon as you take it off, that is the forward facing. It's a bit like a corkscrew going into a cork. So that will always be the spiral will go right through. When you've doubled up your thread as you have, what you've got is you've got one that's going to go forward, but the thread next to it is going backwards. So that's why you might have a few knots in it.
Yes. But I think it's also very important that the winding the thread off your spool is so important. And when you take it off, if it's all twisted beforehand, take a moment just to straighten it out before you get it through your needle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rachel, are you still there? Are you winning?
I'm winning. Well, I'm not. I won't say I'm winning, John, but I'm still here.
Have you decided that if EPP is not for you and you want to give up?
Yeah.
No. But
No,
I can see how this is so mindful because you know, we always find this when especially when someone's come on as a guest, we go so quiet because we're just now we don't have to be the teacher, we are the pupil, and it's really nice just to learn something new, try something out. I love it.
It's very good fun.
I can see how this practice would be quite mindful, just even preparing the little hexagons. You could spend your time just sat there, just cutting out your hexagons, preparing them, gluing them, getting them all ready, stacking them into a nice little tray like you've got. You know, that's all part of the process, isn't it, really? And then you've got the sewing, and then you've got the sort of like seeing it build up, and you've got several sort of groups to then attach to each other. I just think that's the whole process is quite mindful. And of course, you don't have to get too stressed out because the pattern is there for you. The pattern has been planned so that all you've got to do, you're the assembler, you're just assembling it and doing the practice. Yes, you might have to think about, maybe you're going to think about some of the colors you're going to use, picking the threads, the right color threads. But no, I love it. I think this is a great idea.
It is very mindful, I have to say.
So when you're ready to set your second one on, it's very important to remember which one is your middle one. And again, you're taking a short end of a new one. You can see I'm alternating my colors because I'm using the Macawa white and blue of the same fabric. I thought that could be quite fun. And then what you're going to do now, there is no right or wrong way of doing this. I personally prefer to get all my petals attached to the middle and then go around and sew my corner bits. So you can see that I normally end up with one like this. So I always sew the middle bits and then come back and sew my petals together when I do it. And you can see I ran out of thread at this point. So that's a nice way of doing it as well. And it's a very traditional one. So if you do get to the point where you love doing this, you can go and just create acres of these and then put them into a beautiful quilt. I'm going to send you a picture, Rachel, which no doubt will be on the screen right now, where you'll be able to see a friend of mine who created this gorgeous flower garden only using Liberty fabric. And that was a great responsibility. It was one of my first quilts that I quilted in the studio. She's my husband's best friend. So having her come to me to quilt a quilt, there was great responsibility on it, especially when it's Liberty fabric.
Yeah.
And I think you can agree, it looks amazing the way she did that ombre with the flowers.
Yeah, because I think you've got so many elements here because yes, you've got the mindful sort of practice of making the little hexagons. I mean, like you say, sitting and gluing them, although I haven't got any glue, so I'm having to use pins. I know you said about basting, but it's fine. It's fine. For what we're doing, it's fine. But, you know, sit and glue them. But then the sewing is one part of it. But very much like when Russell did his volume and density of stitch exercise, Gary, you were doing stitch, but you were also planning how it was going to look. And this is the same here, isn't it? That you're, as you say, you're using different fabrics to create a different look.
And especially, I was just thinking, I'll show you in a minute what I've done. So I've picked out, so I've got a pattern center, and then I've picked out couple of blocks of color that was just sort of like taken from that first initial center. So there's lots of different things that you could do. I mean, like you just mentioned, you could do an ombre effect, you could create pictures when you get really sophisticated. But if you just want to start really simple, it's just take maybe one which has got the pattern, and then think about what colors are in that pattern, and then use those as your outer petals. Could look quite nice as well. So I think we've got like what we call a feature print, and then you've got what's called complementary or ditzy prints to go with it, which will take essence from that single central print, and then it complements it as you then do the petals on the outside, which is quite nice.
And I think, as you're saying, it's a really good way of you being able to play with the colors that you love and fabrics that you enjoy, that you can then put colors together that people may not have considered putting together, but you found and worked and seen as beautiful.
Yes.
It's very individual the way you do it, because I think every single person making a hexagon quilt will make a totally different one, even if they're using all the same fabric, because the way we put things together is all so unique. This is the one I'm making with my Stewart fabric.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
When you're talking about how many hours it takes.
Now, how long has that taken?
Well, it's 7 years in the process, but it's just, I just love working on it. But it's the case of finding the time.
Yeah.
And then every time I do it, I end up laying everything out again to see how much more I've got to do.
Yeah.
And it's really good fun. It's almost like a little jigsaw puzzle when you're doing it as well.
So, John, do you have several quilts on the go at the same time? That must be the secret.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I have, it's terrible to, unfinished projects that I have at the moment is probably hitting about 130.
Oh, do you know, it always amazed me. I mean, like you say, you've got a lot of quilts on the go, and a UFO retreat or just a gathering for the day, with a lovely homemade cake and tea and coffee flowing. And it's just lovely to sit around, getting on, everyone doing their own project and look what they're doing, but also the chatter and the conversations that happen. You know, we talk about politics, talk about recipes, food, things that happen to people. And it's just lovely, where I think people really appreciate that getting together. Since when we had lockdown, we couldn't see nobody and we were isolated at home. I think now when we do get together, people really appreciate that time, you know, more, and don't take it for granted. That's the thing.
Totally agree with you.
So I'm doing the one flower, and I've done now. What's this called, John, when you actually just pick out one shape from the thing? Is it fussy cutting?
Yes.
Fussy cutting.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I'll pick out, and actually that's the piece of cutting. It has got more oranges and pinks and things in it than just that. So what I would do is now I'm using my block colors, and then I would make up lots of them, but maybe the center was maybe the orange flower, or maybe the what have I got, an orange flower, a purple flower, and then I've got like another one which is all white with colors. So I would do that. So that's how I would sort of like start my design. Literally completely today is just impromptu. I just had a look what was in my scrap bin, what was suitable fabric for a quilt. And actually that was something I was going to speak to you about. I mean, have you made a quilt from found fabrics? And you know, when you've got sort of like it could be made from old shirts and things like that. Have you ever done anything like that, John?
So my husband works for TK Maxx, so he has a colossal collection of shirts. And when they wear out, we have a little day where I take the shirts and then cut them all into hundreds of hexagons, loads of 6.5-inch squares. I keep the collars and the pockets and the cuffs as well, because I've seen gorgeous bags and pillows made out of the buttons.
Yes.
So you can actually then do those instead of zips and things. So we cut up about 45 shirts a couple of weeks ago, which was great fun. So I'm going to do a half and half and say they're all cut out, ready to go, but I've never actually had the time to sit down and do them. But you're astonished. You know yourself how many meters of fabric go in to make a really good shirt. And you're looking at about 3 or 4 meters, and it's wonderful, because when you've used the shirt, you then get to cut it up and use it again. It's wonderful.
Chris English does it, doesn't he? He uses a lot, and as does Russell as well. So, but with found fabrics or reclaimed fabrics, it's the softness of them that I really love. You know, they're so soft because they've been laundered, and they, you know, can really work them really well. That it makes lovely, but it's lovely for quilting. So yeah, I just wondered if you had done anything. Obviously, what my question would be, it would be you'd have to, and I'm sure I'm right here, that you'd have to have the same sort of weights of fabrics. If you were going to piece them all together, you couldn't then suddenly like, oh, well, I'm going to use shirt, but I'm going to put a bit of denim jean in there. That wouldn't really work really well, would it?
Well, it will. You've just got to be mindful of how you do it. So if I was putting normal cotton with denim, what I would be doing is I'd be putting a light interfacing on the back of my cotton to make that a little bit stronger.
Yes, good idea.
And there's some amazing, Lena do a wonderful collection of light interfacings as well. But also, I don't know if you've ever used Quilter's Grid with Lena.
No.
So I'm addicted to Quilter's Grid. And there's so many amazing things that you can do with Quilter's Grid. And one of the things I love is because you are interfacing, you're gluing it down to the interfacing. It doesn't matter whether you're using cotton or canvas or whether you're using felt. It's already interfaced. Every single piece of fabric is cut out into a square or a half square triangle, and then you're putting that onto the interfacing, so the interfacing secures everything before you quilt it. So for me, I think that works very, very well as an option to do scrap quilts and things like that. And you get to lay it out first before you iron everything down, to glue everything down to start with.
So you get an idea of what it's going to look like as well,
exactly.
don't you? Wow. Well, that is good. That is a good little tip, that. Lovely.
So I think we've all done 4 hexagons now, haven't we?
I've done 3. I've done 3 hexagons, but mine is
Rachel, can we take a moment and notice how very good at sewing by hand Gary is? Did you notice how quick those stitches were?
Oh, I know. He's very good.
Very good.
I know. He's very good. Well, I think that's beautiful. John, let me bring your hands in as well. When would you take the paper out, John?
So I'll show you here on the Stuart quilt that I'm making. I always leave, especially on the borders, I leave at least 1 hexagon on the edges. So you see this is, and these were ones that I cut by hand. It wasn't kept, but then 1 in from it, I always take the papers out. So you can see always around the edge, I've always got 1 hexagon kept at the edge all the way around. It's just because that way it keeps its shape. You're not going to lose the shape of these hexagons as you go, because when I sew something onto that, I want to make sure that it's still secure.
Yes.
But what I love about the glue, you can see how man-handled this has been. You can see that's all squished. The glue is still holding.
Yeah.
And I know people complain about the cost of it, and it is not a cheap thing using the glue for your basting. I get that, but it is so much easier being able to have it last for that period of time.
Yeah.
And one day, maybe I should commit to doing this. I'm going to finish this for festival for next year. I think we should do that. That'll be the thing.
Do it.
But I am not hand quilting it. It is going on my machine.
Yes, I think you've done enough handy work on it. Well, my camera died over my hands, so I couldn't show mine, but I was quite relieved because, but you know what? I did actually manage to sew pieces together. I did. I did. I sewed it together. I didn't make any patterns or anything, but I did sew 3 pieces together. And actually, for me, it was more about just learning how to do it and feeling that mindful practice. And I can see that it is actually a lovely thing that you could just sit down and do. And as you say, who knows where it's going to take you? Make it into a pin cushion, or make the front of a cushion, or make a quilt, see how much you enjoy. I know Sarah Hibbert said that she's got a quilt that she is hand quilting, and she said, but she will never, ever, ever finish it. She's been quilting it for about 15 years. And but that's the point. She doesn't want to finish it because it's her comfort blanket. She literally just sits and does some hand quilting to sort of meditate with it. That's her thing. So I think that this is a lovely thing to do. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, John, for coming into the 2-time tutorial. I just have to ask a question. How much liquid is there left in your glass now? See, because you filled it up quite.
Oh. I think there's been a refill there.
Yeah, I think it might be. All I'm going to say is pumpkin spice gin liqueur. Dreadful. Don't try it. You won't like it.
Well, I have to say, it's the time of year, isn't it, when the pumpkin latte is sold by a very famous brand of coffee, and no, that doesn't work for me either. So no.
Really? No. I'm a massive fan of that. My husband has to work in America quite a lot, so he comes back with the pumpkin spice cereals.
Oh no!
I'm so delighted every time he does it.
Yes, so lovely YouTuber. I hope that you have enjoyed our content today. And John, thank you so much for spending the time with us and for giving us that exercise. And we shall all be eagerly awaiting to see that quilt hanging in the Festival of Quilts next year.
It's only 6.5, 7 months away. That's the terrifying thing.
That was quite a bold statement you made there, but we'll see.
You've done it now.
Well, good luck with it, John. We shall all look out for it at the Festival of Quilts. Thank you so much to lovely Gary as well, as always, for joining in with the fun. We will see you on the next Tea Time tutorial. Maybe just me and Gary, maybe with a guest. You never know what's going to happen. Just hit the bell, open the window, and find out. See you later. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Lovely. That's
Well
perfect.
done.
Thank you so much, John.